Hey y'all, I'm the Lady Pie Scythe, and this is a bad idea. This is a run that I started without knowing whether it was possible at all. I will be trying to beat every main mission in Nioh 2 using only consumables. That means I can't equip weapons, deal damage with unarmed attacks, spend anima for any reason including burst counters, or enter yokai shift. In other words, most of the tools I'd normally use to beat the game are off limits. But don't worry, I found this rock on the ground. That'll do just fine, right? Okay, maybe that guy was too tough. Let's see if it works better on this one. It's gonna be one of these runs, isn't it? Since I can't kill anything right now, I run through the first level, collecting whatever isn't nailed down and befriending a few Kodamas along the way. In the game's introductory Dark Realm section, a locked door blocks progress, but the key is just lying on the ground, so I can make it to the boss door just fine. Unfortunately, while I have been finding more weapons and arrows on the ground, I have not been finding rocks. 4 rocks is never going to be enough to kill a boss. However, at the shrine, I can sell off all the useless gear I found. In exchange, the Kodama will give me Divine Rice, which I can spend at the Kodama Bazaar, on more rocks. With 38 rocks to my name, I think I'm finally ready to kill something. After 2 minutes of fighting and 35 rocks, I managed to kill the weakest enemy in the game. It drops a rock. Yeah, the game's mocking me. Fortunately, that is not the end of my ability to collect resources here. With the Divine Branch Fragment, I can exit and restart the mission. This costs me all of the Amrita I happen to be holding, so I make sure to spend all of it before I leave. This means I have an endlessly repeatable, if very slow, way to grind for levels and rocks without killing anything. I just get to spend a while running past everything and suffering from the fact that opening doors doesn't give iframes in this game. After some testing, I realized that the only stat my rocks scale with is ninjutsu power, so I pump all my points into dexterity to squeeze a little bit of extra damage out. In fact, the 2 jutsu power stats are really the only thing consumable items of any kind seem to scale with. Other numbers, and even buffs, just don't seem to have any effect at all, so my options for upgrading my damage are going to be fairly limited throughout this run. And this just adds to the pile of reasons that at this rate things are going to take actual forever. I can only carry 99 rocks, and grinding out enough levels to make them do meaningful damage with whatever Amrita I can find as scraps on the floor is going to take a ludicrous amount of time. Fortunately, a couple iterations of this later, I saw an out. The bazaar was selling something other than rocks, Euroka water. I can only buy 2 Euroka waters at a time, and they vanish if I leave the stage, but look at that damage. And if I can get something like that, I need to see what else I can pull from the bazaar. The bazaar is a strange mechanic. I never actually figured out how it works. The amount of items available in the bazaar clearly depends on the number of Kodama you have found in the current stage. The mechanics by which the bazaar determines what items to give you and when the items available in the bazaar cycle, however, are a total mystery to me. It seems like each shrine has its own set of items, but they also somehow cycle based on progressing to the next shortcut as well. Not the next shrine, the next shortcut door. I think that's how that works. But after some messing around, I managed to dredge up some shuriken, which I can throw for several times as much damage as a rock and with more speed and accuracy. More importantly, I also found gunpowder bombs, which are slower but deal heavy damage. Their fire damage also causes buildup of the burning status effect, so if I land enough of them, I can do even more damage over time. Finally, I managed to find a set of fleeting guardian amulets. These let me use my Guardian Spirit's special attack without entering Yokai Shift, but they're expensive. Each of these items has its own low carrying limit, and the Bazaar only lets you purchase up to a fraction of the normal limit. But after throwing rocks, this is a dramatic improvement. At this point, I'm feeling confident enough to take on the first boss, Mizuki, which completely thrashes me. It's not even close. I just don't have enough damage to make it even halfway through the health bar without running out of items. Mizuki simply is not beatable unless I can find a way to more than double my total damage potential. So I give in and do something I wasn't sure I was going to allow. Using the skill points I picked up from using all those items, I can learn ninjutsu. It's functionally one of the two types of quote-unquote magic in this game, but both thematically and mechanically, both it and the other type of magic, Onmyo magic, consist entirely of consumable items. Many of the items are even identical in both function and flavor to standard consumables. Take these Iga gunpowder bombs, for example. They're indistinguishable from the standard kind, but have their own cap. With these, I can carry 3 times as many bombs as I could before. Better, they replenish each time I rest at a shrine. The total number of jutsu items I can prepare is limited by my ninjutsu capacity, but since that scales with the dexterity I was leveling already, I have plenty for the few items I can make. In addition to the shurikens and bombs, I can also throw kunai, which are just shuriken, but better. With this new firepower, I'm sure I'll have enough damage to take out the big angry horseman. The only flaw in this plan, it turns out, is a skill issue on my part. It even recurs. But after that, I managed to reduce the boss to 0 hit points, and it doesn't die. I try throwing more things at it, but to no avail. The only way to progress the game is to break my rules and do a grapple attack. This means the run is technically impossible, so I do the only logical thing in this situation, and throw a massive tantrum screaming and breaking things. Thankfully, my new best friend Tokichiro uses a shiny rock to untilt me and allow the run to continue. After a brief side quest where I blow up a tree, I go to the next story mission. Tokichiro and I meet with Saito Dosan, a man who doesn't bother to point out the fact that I look literally identical to his daughter, down to the makeup. He sends us to gather some shiny plot rocks from Flaming Blacksmith Village. Here, I get to test out the final ninjutsu tool I have access to, the Blister Beetle Powder. It doesn't do any direct damage, but the Poison Cloud is very good for slowly wearing down enemies. And I do mean very slowly. That said, I will need that damage. See, this mission is called The Beast Born of Smoke and Flames, and I'm about to fight Enenra, the Beast Born of Smoke and Flames, who is the fire boss of the Fire Zone who throws flaming tornadoes at me. Since this isn't Dark Souls 1, this dude is not going to be vulnerable to fire at all. For normal builds, this isn't an issue, since even elemental weapons do mostly physical damage in this game. But for me, most of my damage is from the gunpowder bombs, which do 50% fire damage. I do have the advantage of being able to bait the boss into these pillars, causing it to drop water buckets on its head for extra damage, but it's not enough to offset the sheer speed and power of my opponent. My light armor and non-existent weapon make blocking untenable, so if I get caught up in an attack, I will just kind of die. So I do, repeatedly, and then I suffer this absolute heartbreaker of an attempt. So I full reset the mission, restock all my standard consumables from storage, and run all the way back. Not wanting to do that again, I dismantle the boss and move on to more important things, like flirting with the local tsundere. She might be trying to kill me now, but we can work on that. So I'm going to go do the logical first step in courting a girl and ask my own dad for permission. His house seems extra monster-filled, though. On the way there, I decide to pick up the second flavor of jutsu, Onmyo magic. I don't have access to any damage-dealing items from it for now, but since it counts toward a separate capacity from ninjutsu, I have no problem filling it up with life leech talismans. Once I tag an enemy with them, I get a shockingly large amount of recovery on each hit. Considering how much of a glass cannon this build is, I'm happy to take the extra healing. It'll help with the fact that my dad seems to have installed a poison swamp at his house. Normally you can clear it by destroying these snake statues, but with this kind of damage, I'm going to save myself the time and just leave them alone and run through. This will buy me precious extra minutes of my life to squander fighting this giant snake. Yatsu no Kami is an absolute monster. My damage potential is running thin long before the boss runs out of health. It's hard to hit the big wiggly bastard because the lock-on points are bad, and it has this definitely fair attack that keeps one-shotting me. So I fail to go pet a cat. Technically, petting cats is against the rules, since it causes the cat to follow you around and attack enemies. This is pretty clearly a source of damage that isn't a consumable, but I decided to allow it because, come on, I need the boon to my mental health here. I will not, however, be using any of the naturally occurring cats in the world to accomplish things that I could not otherwise accomplish. I also discovered that the Mujina, which copy your gear, do not copy my consumable items. Me, but unarmed, is about as threatening a foe as you might expect. Coming back to the big snake, I once again clutch up after my break. Running low on inventory, I decide to throw some of these shrapnel bombs I found lying around, and holy stars, look at that damage! The boss is defeated, but unfortunately I'm now pretty much out of bombs. So I'm unarmed. So my dad has to sacrifice his life to save me from a bunch of regular enemies. If only I had a weapon, maybe I could have done something. Clearly, I need to get stronger. It's time to head to the dojo for a training arc. The first ninja training mission is really simple. I have to make a set of shuriken and then throw them at this ninja until he dies. This unlocks the second ring of the ninjutsu skill tree, so I'll have a lot more tools going forward. For now though, let's move on to the first Onmyo training mission. It's also really simple. I have to make a set of purification talismans, apply them to my weapon, and then beat the Seokai to death with it. With the weapon that I'm not allowed to use. Since I can't make any other jutsu items here and outside consumables cannot be brought into dojo missions, this training is, with my rules, completely impossible. And since it's not mandatory, I just have to accept that I'm never going to be able to use almost all of the Onmyo magic items this run. But don't worry, any sufficiently advanced ninja is indistinguishable from a wizard. With the adept part of the ninjutsu tree unlocked, I now have access to the shadow art elemental items. These attacks are sluggish, but they all have powerful elemental damage, and the ability to do absurd bonus damage to anything that's out of key. The flaming heron feathers launch 3 slow homing projectiles that are strangely single target despite the size of the explosion. The Raijin feathers let me call down lightning on an area, tearing into anything present. And then there's Yoroka water, which misses if the target happens to move slightly towards or away from you. Most importantly, I now have the ability to make the ninjutsu counterpart to the shrapnel bomb. This weapon is like a gunpowder bomb, but with about 3 times the physical damage. You've already seen just how good this is. With these new abilities, Tokichiro and I go to meet with our new boss, the legendary Nobunaga Oda, who is my brother-in-law. My first task, win a battle for him. After convincing this chump to get out of the way, I carve my way through a yokai-infested mountain in an insane flanking maneuver that brings me directly to the big guy himself. Imagawa Yoshimoto is a powerful opponent, with quick sword combos, lightning arrow spam, and his own guardian spirit trying to blast me into the dirt. And I don't care. He just doesn't have the durability to withstand my attacks, and despite my worries, doesn't bother to block anything. In a first for this run, he goes down first try. My reward? Tokichiro trying to flirt with my sister-in-law. Sure, why not? Let's go help Tokichiro with his next plan, building a castle in a single night. I'm not sure what his plan is, or how Aquaman here figures into it, but I assume he knows what he's doing. I decided to take a moment here to test out some exploding shurikens, but I wasn't exactly impressed by the damage. They certainly didn't help with this weird dude here. While I usually avoided optional NPC companions for this run, I accidentally recruited Aquaman, and decided I didn't feel like resetting. He certainly did not trivialize the mission, though. After a relaxing moment, I leave him behind in a hot spring and go catch up with my best friend Tokichiro, who definitely has my well-being in mind. The Kamaitachi here is fast, but it's a bit of a glass cannon, so I'm able to down it without much issue, at which point its eyes change color and it turns good. Honestly, I'm not sure how the murder weasel is going to help build a castle either, so I'm just gonna let Tokichiro cook. While he figures the rest of that out, it's time for the next dojo mission. This next mission is really simple. I have to kill 5 ninjas with 6 shurikens. That may sound impossible, but the shurikens are poisoned and one good hit will proc and kill the ninja. A bad hit will not. A miss will not. The smoke bombs and caltrops are not helping, and if I end up with 1 ninja left on a sliver of health, tough luck. I gotta reset. Thankfully, the untouched ninjutsu on my gear gives me a chance to have extra shots, but that's all luck-based. After a few attempts though, I managed to finish off that last ninja with some caltrops of my own and claim my prize. The first new ninjutsu ability I test out is the Storm Kunai. 3 kunai in a spread, each of which does half the damage of a normal one. It doesn't strike me as being cost-effective, so it's out. More interesting is the Iga Enhanced Shrapnel Bomb. I was excited to pick this one up since it's the big sister of my best attack, but I turned out to be half right to be excited. It's a cluster bomb, so the damage is extremely variable, depending on how many of the hitboxes actually make contact with the enemy. It's absolutely devastating against big, slow targets, but otherwise it's a bit sketchy. I also move on from my ragtag pile of gear to a unified set of Fuma ninja robes. Every piece of this gives bonus shuriken and kunai damage, and since I have no real set bonuses to take advantage of yet, that's the best I can do as far as armor goes. My next goal is to take the fight to my sister and avenge my father. This involves navigating the horrible elevator room, making sure to pet the cat, doing the thing ninjas are known for and fighting fair against this mini-boss, concluding that laying mines isn't worth the trouble, dodging snowballs, and finally stumbling into the boss room. Yoshitatsu has most of the same powers the player normally does, but she doesn't have any bombs, and she also doesn't really have a good answer for bombs, so I quickly blast through her and prove that I am the superior twin. After this, we must make a hasty escape from an enemy army in the dead of night. Thankfully, we've sent Mumio, our expert yokai hunter and resident tsundere, out ahead to scout for a safe path. So let's have a look at the safe path that Mumio found for us. Okay, thank goodness it's a— No. That is an owl. Fun fact about me, I fucking hate owls. That probably sounds crazy, but trust me when I say it comes from experience. Want to know the story? Maybe I'll tell it here someday. Subscribe. Completing that mission gave me access to the Hidden Teeth House, which means I can finally pick a clan to give some extra bonuses to my character. I go with the Imago clan, which causes my ninjutsu effects to inflict blindness. This turned out to not be particularly useful, but it sounded like a good idea, so it's going to be the setup for a while. Megara Naotaka and his army here look intimidating, but honestly I'm more concerned about this big crystal. It causes nearby enemies and itself to rapidly regenerate health, and I'm glad I was able to break it quickly. Megara himself is a pushover. His fighting style is simply too fair to be a threat to me. With that done, we move on to Bird in a Cage, where we cut through another war zone in order to murder our sister-in-law Oichi's husband, Azai Nagamasa. He's the first boss in a while to actually take me down, but on the second attempt I remove most of his health without depleting his ki, keeping him out of his more aggressive Dark Realm moveset. When the ki finally drops, I stagger lock him with kunai for the kill. Sorry girl, I hope your next marriage goes better. My next opponent is the Saika clan, and did that lady just blow me up with a shrapnel bomb? Nope, that cannot stand. I will not allow usurpers here. Weaving through the Saika gunfire, I find something that seems like none of my business. Never mind, you're dead. This mission also introduces the horror of lamps. No, seriously, they're obnoxious to break and spawn a continuous stream of flying projectile enemies. I end up just running past and into something much more intriguing. In addition to being an absolute dreamboat, Saika Maguichi here is the end of this run's string of easy bosses. He's fast, extremely resilient to all projectile attacks, and can contest me right back with gunfire and bombs. After 6 deaths and enough poison to kill a village, I finally force the man to retreat. And the mission doesn't end. Before I can leave, I'm going to have to take on something even worse. My own incompetence. I mean, what was I even expecting to accomplish here? The spider cow is a big problem too, though. It's shockingly fast for its size and has all the raw power one would expect. I can hit it for massive damage in return, but it takes a while to get a good enough run to take the kill. With this done, I unlock the penultimate ninja training. It's really simple: defeat my teacher. And I just don't have enough damage to pull that off right now, especially since he likes to use the scroll of cheating death. So we'll come back to this later. Continuing the story, Oda and my sister meet their historically mandated fates in this blaze, but Mitsuhide's treachery has dire consequences for me as well. A full hour of running around in this flaming maze where everything looks the same. Thankfully, even in this hellscape, I can stop to pet the cat. And it does give me plenty of time to test out my new toy, the Pinwheel Shuriken. This thing deals powerful physical damage both when thrown and when returning to me, letting me tear chunks out of things if I can line up both hits. It's completely ineffective at dealing with any kind of elevation, though. The maze ends in an encounter with a cat girl, and that's her downfall because today she has met her natural predator. With my brother-in-law Oda dead, it's time for some vengeance. But when I get to Mitsuhide, I find that his mage boy has transformed into the game's next boss, Flexile Sentry, but good. The Fireside's attacks are manageable, but I find myself struggling to dodge the arrow shots from the ice half, so it takes a couple tries to bring it down. With Tokichiro revealing the extent of his corruption, I flip sides and make a new best friend. No, not the ninja, the cat. No, the other cat. Nekomata is the only guardian spirit in the game that gives a bonus directly for my build, plus 5% thrown weapon damage. It's a small boost, but by default it's best in slot. With this new power, I prepare for my next task, rescuing my sister-in-law from Tokichiro's armies. The chump takes more than a gesture to get out of my way this time, but he's still a chump. As are all the normal enemies, so we reach the defender's last holdout, and my sister-in-law Oichi's new husband has turned himself into a monster that cannot distinguish friend from foe. Great. Well, let's just mop this up and... Oh no. Shibata Katsui is, in fact, an absolute menace. He's incredibly fast and loves to chain together half a dozen or more attacks that will all lead to my death when they land. I die a lot. I spent more time directly fighting this one man than any other boss in the game, but eventually he finally perished. I hope your next marriage goes better. You know what? Never mind. Tea time. Okay, this is more relaxing than the tea, to be honest. Tokichiro recruited some very competent guards, but once I reach him, I have no problem reminding him exactly who was the brawn of the operation. Next time, don't bring swords to a grenade fight. Unfortunately, killing Tokichiro seems to have made things worse and not better. At the start of this mission, Mumio forces herself into the party, but she only sticks around for a few minutes before Aquaman throws her off a bridge. He and his weasel are here with a vengeance, and I get a sharp reminder of how obnoxious Kusarigamas are to fight against. I understand that it's the whole point of the weapon, but the fact that it conceals its length is really throwing me for a loop here. After finally putting him to rest, I confront my next problem. A giant monster bombarding me from afar. Best not stick around here for long, or deal with that guy at all. We have bigger problems, both metaphorically and literally. Daidarabachi is the bane of challenge runners everywhere, a boss with non-standard mechanics. The theory behind this boss is simple: destroy the fingers to stagger it, then grapple it for massive damage. Problem is, I can deal damage by attacking the hands, too. So those grabs aren't required, which means if I'm going to win this, I need to figure out a way to do a lot more damage to those hands. None of my current tools are getting me anywhere, so I fall back out of the mission, run some side missions for resources, and then make my big changes. And I'm not kidding about those side missions. I literally named one of my recordings for this filler arc, because I spent so much time mucking about at this point in the run. But as far as the big changes go, the first thing I did was drop the blindness gimmick and switch my clan to Matsunaga for the extra bomb damage. With that, I now have enough damage to kill Flying Kato in the dojo with 3 shrapnel bombs. Now yes, the fight with him only gives 2 shrapnel bombs, but with my 15% untouched ninjutsu chance, I just need to get lucky to have a 3rd bomb and kill him before he can react. Completing this training gives me 2 benefits. First, I can now form Kato for my armor set of choice, the Master of Illusion set. From a pure ninjutsu perspective, this is the best armor in the game. Almost every part of this set bonus is specifically geared toward being the most powerful ninja possible. Plus 10% ninjutsu damage when I'm at full health, a huge chunk of raw ninjutsu power, faster ki recovery whenever I use a ninjutsu item, and another 15% untouched ninjutsu chance take my firepower to the next level. I have to respec to meet the requirements, but it's well worth it. I also get the second tier of shadow arts, most notably the Hellfire Scrolls. I think the results of this one speak for themselves. By using shinobi boxes, rare items which restore 30% of my prepared ninjutsu, I can keep the pressure on and tear through the giant's remaining health. As a final act of spite, Daidarabachi demands to be finished off with a grab. And then I die, but in a cutscene this time. Turns out my ability to shrug death off is diegetic though, and after a nice chat with my mom in the afterlife, it's on to the final act of the main story. We descend into the depths of the temple of Ryodo-in, making sure to pet the cat and destroy these crystals so we can put the encased sacred orbs in the mouths of these dragons and lower the water. But we're too late. The possessed Tokichiro releases the great evils trapped within, and we find ourselves facing off Shuten Doji, who is a fire-themed boss, and I brought too much fire damage for my own good. After coming back with the correct weaponry, I easily dispatch him. Farewell, Oni, you were more intimidating as a little girl. After taking a detour to rescue the blacksmith's dad, I go to confront Tokichiro in his massive golden castle, in the name of vengeance for this guy who I definitely remember the name of. There are several boss matches here, but with my new power, they all perish. No. Cut the feed. I did not just die to Kasha, that never happened, that's not canon. Instead, let's focus on Tokichiro's beautiful wife, and my suffering. Lady Osakabe is my least favorite boss in this game, and it's not even close. She can launch projectiles and lasers from more directions than I can keep track of, especially as I'm trying to line up hits on her ridiculous squiggle tendrils, and their absolute refusal to drift into hitability unless I bait out their slam attack. Only by destroying the tentacles can I get her to provide brief openings for damage on her actual health bar. I break out the other 2 hell arts for this, using massive blasts of ice and lightning to tear through her health bar. And look, another required grab to finish this one off as well. It's my unlucky day, and I'm going to have Tokichiro's head for this. Infiltrating Tokichiro's cherry blossom viewing, I go on my final hunt for the Lord of all Japan. My plan here did not, however, involve dying to the man with the dumbest hat in all of Japan. Tokichiro even recruited the man with the second dumbest hat in all of Japan, so he'd have a replacement ready to go for when the dumbest hat guy inevitably died. How responsible of him, but I'm still going to kill him. Let's remind this guy why gun how to render. Never mind, I guess you can bring swords to a grenade fight after all. It's not enough to stop me, but Tokichiro was only the warm-up. From his corpse, the demon possessing him emerges to face me personally, and Kashin Koji is completely beyond my abilities. His swarms of shadow clones would be no problem if I had, a weapon, but my attacks are slow, deliberate, and have limited ammo. They simply cannot contend with a ceaseless swarm of expendables. So, I cannot defeat this man. But you know who can? With my clay bell of beckoning consumable items, I call upon the spirits of the cats I pet throughout this run, and they send me aid. The cats don't do very much damage, but it's enough to keep the shadow clones off my back, and give me the opening I need to kill my target. My work done, I go to take a nap in the temple, and fall asleep for over a decade. Eventually, though, the protagonist of the first game, who is definitely not Geralt of Rivia, wakes me up. It takes me a little bit to get moving again, but eventually I'm able to overcome him and face the new day, and year, and decade. After running around for a while with my new friend and Mumio, and experiencing some plot that I assume would make sense if I played the first game, I can challenge the real final boss of Vanilla, the demon behind all of this madness, Otake Maru. Unleashing the true power of evil, his attacks make him a force to be reckoned. Oh, he's dead already. Okay, let's move on to the DLC. And continuing at the proud tradition started with Dark Souls 1, that means time travel. We appear on a stormy, boat-infested coastline and are forced to reckon with the fact that the player character in this game cannot swim. Our first opponent is Benkei, the mysterious warrior monk, who manages to take a death off me before I blow him up enough times to convince him we should be friends instead. Fighting our way to the docks, we encounter the true boss of this mission, Umin Yudo. The damage here is extreme, but the boss has a fire weakness, so my damage is equally extreme. Once the jelly is dispersed, Benkei introduces me to his boyfriend, Minamito no Yoshitsune. We then jump forward a reasonable amount of time to go try to save Yoshitsune from some assailants at the other end of Japan. While I do die to this silly putty potato head nightmare, on the second round I manage to avoid the indignity of being swooped up Kirby style and get the kill. Escaping the Spirit Stone mines, I link up with Yoshitsune, and we run past a bunch of enemies in order to face the final boss of this DLC. Minamito no Yoshitsune, now in full rage mode because his boyfriend died. This is another brutal fight. He moves fast enough to be hard to hit, and can easily drop me with a single volley from most of his projectile attacks. At this point, the only iteration on my build I have left is to take advantage of the fact that the DLCs use the new Game Plus mechanics, and craft a shiny new set of Flying Kato armor in the newly available Divine rarity tier. The improvements are marginal, but they make me feel better, and I eventually muster the skill to overcome this beast, and move on to the second DLC, Darkness in the Capital, which brings me into my favorite environment in this game, another Flaming City maze. Except now, instead of flaming wheels, we have entire wagons. This section is mercifully short, however, as I get to face off against Minamito no Yorimitsu. This woman can block projectiles like a Jedi, and her insane rushdown mode is hard to deal with, but eventually I'm able to keep my distance well enough to bring her down. After a bit more Flaming City, we face the second major boss of the DLC, Tsuchigumo. Yorimitsu immediately falls to cutscene-induced ineptness, and I quickly follow due to incompetence-induced ineptness. Tsuchigumo is a very strong distance closer and likes to try to restrain my movement, making it a poor matchup for my ranged glass cannon that relies on mobility to survive. This ends up being one of the harder bosses of the run, but I eventually take its soul like I did all the rest. Before taking on the final main mission of the DLC, I cut a detour into the side content to fight the giant toad. As a master of ninjutsu himself, the toad is a perfect thematic opponent, if an easy one. It also gives me the giant toad's soul core, the only soul core in the entire game targeted at my build, It's only worth about 2% bomb damage and 2% untouched ninjutsu, but those bonuses stand out when they're the only ones of their kind available on a soul core. Moving on to the final mission of the DLC, we face the man behind the darkness, Ashia Domon. He corrupts my faithful companion into the White Tiger, a boss which I honestly forgot existed. After about 70 seconds, I remembered why. Afterwards, Yorimitsu and Abe no Seimei force their way into the party and help me take down this Nioh with ease before running off one room before the final battle, convinced that they have more important things to do than make sure the evil mastermind dies when he is right there. I face Domon alone, and his formidable magic would be a lot more useful if he actually cast any of it. I don't know why, but he just kind of walked toward me and let himself die. I'll take it. Before the DLC can end, however, he summons the 8 lightning gods of Yomi into his body. They managed to confuse me to death with whatever the heck this attack was, but the second run goes smoothly, leaving me with only the final DLC, the First Samurai. After sprinting through this normal and healthy village, I face the first boss of the DLC, Otake Maru. Yes, again. But he does have a very different moveset this time. It helps him, but not much. I then team up with my mom to fight evil. Specifically, this awful bird manticore thing that's more dangerous than most actual bosses. It is not, however, as dangerous as the particular boss coming up. Tate Abashi was the boss I was scared of most going into this DLC. Her huge sweeping attacks and raw mobility, aggression, and damage seemed like a deadly matchup for me. And it was, several times, but I pulled through it much more quickly than I expected. One of those rare cases where I end up displaying actual skill during a run, I guess. This takes us to the final main map of the game, a distant dream. One look at this place makes it crystal clear that this is the final dungeon with a capital F and a capital D. Guarding the gate is a guy who is just plain named Kinky. I don't have anything to add to that, I just need a bath. Kinky is the first of the 4 mini-bosses scattered throughout the castle, most of which are mandatory. To reach the final boss, we must defeat his subordinates, the ice-wielding Suiki and the Master of Purple Fire, Ongyoki. Finally, we must challenge the 4th of the mini-bosses, this awful bird manticore sitting outside the boss door. And with that, it's time to face the last boss. It's Otake Maru again, but this time he's ascended to his final form. Fusing with his guardian spirit, he becomes the Nightmare Bringer, and this run, he lives up to that name. My standard procedure for this fight is to drink 1 Daionjin sake before entering the boss room. This gives me protection from all 3 elemental status effects he inflicts, making the fight much more manageable. I have 20, the maximum number I can bring into a level. I drink every last one of them. I was considering full resetting the level for more, but then, in a flash of learning, I decided to check the Kodama Bazaar first. Sure enough, my little green friends were still there, just as ready to help me finish the fight as they were to get me on my feet all the way back in the beginning. I may be fighting alone on the front lines, but valor alone doesn't win battles or wars. The equipment from my blacksmith, the training from Kado, the constant logistical support of the Kodama at every shrine, hell, even the moral support from the cats I've had along the way, they all helped me to this point. So for all of them, I shall put this madness to its end. Now admittedly, the fact that the Bazaar didn't actually have anything useful undermines that whole heroic thesis statement a bit, but, shut up. The important thing is that I can now say that it's possible to beat every main mission of Nioh 2 with only consumables, and that's it. Bye!